The Madness Tech community connects tech enthusiasts in the field of data, front-end, product and cloud native. Twice a week, on Mondays and Wednesdays, you can find new talks and interviews from the community on this channel. Subscribe now and feel free to join our community and meetups. Events and groups are listed below, and now follow us into the rabbit hole.
To grab a seat. For those of you who are online with us, we have also people here sitting in Munich. It will be a little bit mixed up tonight. And yeah, we hope you get some of the experience through the screen as well. Some of you have been in contact actually with me or the community team. If you want to become in the future also a speaker, a community city lead, want to sponsor an event or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via my email. It's listed up there, but don't worry, I'm still here the whole evening, so you can approach me anytime, ask questions. So first one also takes a picture with a cell phone, so feel free to take a screenshot if you're looking or watching us online, and also from here. Now it's time for our main stage or main guest, Daniel. He's already here. Also a warm applause for Daniel, who will share his knowledge and his talk in a few seconds. So I'm really pleased. Yeah, do the test. Can everyone hear Daniel?
Hello, can you hear me?
That works.
Nice.
That sounds awesome. Great.
Nice.
Awesome. So the stage is yours.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Daniel, and I work at Alasco as a software engineer. And today we're talking a little bit about design systems. So some context, at Alasco, we're on a mission to digitize the construction industry. What does this mean? We essentially help sort of fight legacy software and provide better software solutions for people who build construction projects and also operate buildings. So as I like to personally call it, we're on a mission to relieve the world of dashboards like this. So these are some real screenshots from other products in this space. And if you look on the left, there's an iPad frame around it. I don't know how that works, but so we essentially provide a modern SaaS web solution to manage construction projects. And yeah, let's jump back in time a little bit. So February 2021, we are around 60 people at the time, 2 product teams and 6 backend engineers and 6 frontend engineers. And we've just hired our first designer, David, who's sitting in there. And things are going well. We're shipping product. We're solving customer problems. This is kind of how things looked back then. So you notice a little different, a little more bootstrappy. And if you look a little closer, actually in the middle there, you notice there are some tiers from the front end team, mostly around inconsistencies in design and around sort of the bootstrap / styled components monster that we've been raising inside of our folder called basic components of the code base. So in the front-end team and between David and us, the answer is obvious. We need a design system to solve this. So when we're thinking about design systems, we kind of have an image of these sort of glorious, softly floating web pages that house very carefully crafted components. And here you can see, for example, Shopify's design system Polaris or GitHub's Primer, and they seem very complete, and it's not exactly obvious how you can get there, especially if you're working out of sort of a bootstrap template and have one designer. So today, I want to kind of share the story of how we have approached this and how we are approaching the journey towards a design system and share some lessons along the way. So let's start with the why. So why does it actually make sense to have a design system? if you're a product manager, for example, it might not be immediately obvious why someone would spend 2 weeks on a button component, or I don't know, a week on a modal. And that's why it's important when you're thinking about launching a design system to actually, well, kind of explore for yourself, and also so you can articulate it to other people why a design system actually helps and what problems it solves. So first problem, inefficiency. I've compiled some really like rather awful screenshots from older versions from our app, and they are all sort of trying to be modals to various success. And each of those incarnations of a modal you can think of has a design effort attached to it, although it's not exactly visible, but there's some effort in terms of coming up with a pattern or debating what to use in a given certain circumstance. So there's an effort there. And on the engineering side, of course, maintaining multiple components and keeping those in sync between the instances is very hard and requires a lot of effort. So that's also why these also look a little different. And additionally, a design system can help with well, standardizing things like voice and tone, and making sure that buttons don't say abort and cancel in different places of the product. So second point, inconsistency. We've already touched on this. Can show the same screenshot again. From a user's perspective, having something that looks, well, or relearning the product every time you visit a different part of the app that maybe a different team owns doesn't really help with your user experience and with the learnability of it. So yeah, those are sort of the two blocks from a product perspective to look at this. So if you want better, more consistent user experiences in a faster way, a design system can help you with that. And knowing that can kind of help you articulate it. So we know our why. Now let's look at the what. So what do we mean when we talk about a design system? Fundamentally, you can kind of think of it like those nice blocks here. So on the very bottom level, you have color, typography, and spacing. Those are the tokens that sort of define the visual the visual part of your app. So if you only nail those in your design system and you make sure to apply tokens consistently, then that gets you a long way in terms of consistency. But then you can assemble those tokens to create components, which is what we're trying to do. And anyone basically at this point using UI library like React. So you can create components there. And then there's also Figma that is sort of the Google Docs of Sketch equivalent. You probably know it. So you can design user interfaces there, and you can also make components, and you can give them the same name as your React components, and they essentially behave almost like React components. In the future, potentially, you can completely unify this difference. Right now, it's kind of a very, very tedious process. I'm always very sorry for David pulling those components in line with our React components, but that's sort of where we're at now. And at the very top level, you have documentation. So documentation around basically like guidelines and how-tos for how to use those components. So how to use a button, what should it say, what should it do, what should it not do, when to not use this kind of button, and also how to arrange all of these individual components into sort of a consistent user experience. And there's also things like, voice and tone, like how should it sound? And the docs basically tie it all together. And at the end, you usually end up with this sort of, well, nicely polished website that unifies and kind of describes or lays out a manual for how to build products in the style of that company. So now that we know our why and our what, actually, wait, there's another way. There's another way here. So almost done with the what. So you can also think of the design system a little bit like a product. It's a product essentially that's serving engineering. So we consume components and we consume the guidelines to arrange those. Designers will consume the guidelines to make decisions or to kind of refer to the guideline book to make decisions on basic topics, for example. And product also uses the same shared language and references the design system. So now we know our why, we know our what for a design system. So where do you actually start. In our case, we had a redesign looming on the horizon, and that is really good. We had the opportunity to get the design system that we are working on right away into the product and basically spread it out across the whole product. Yeah, additionally, it helps to have a deadline. So you kind of cut your scope and slice things in a way that gets you started so you don't overthink it. And it puts things to the practice. So you actually get feedback from your users, other engineers, and basically the users of your design system product. So that's really nice, but it also means we have to convert the entire app. So that's not something that, on this slide, actually on the left, you can see, so that's David, Vadim, who's watching remotely, Vadim, and me, and we sort of formed this team to tackle the design system and sort of set up the basis for the redesign over basically 2 weeks. And yeah, so here we are, and we essentially have to convert the entire app. So how do we do that? We can't do it all ourselves. We also can't build components to do that all, especially not in 2 weeks. So we need to get the rest of the front-end team on board to do that. So first we thought about, well, we're already using styled components in the product. So why don't we just use that? Styled components, it's great, it's cool, has a cool icon. So we could use our theme and come up with our tokens and then just use those tokens and reference them in our styled components. So has anyone seen CSS like this in a code base before? Has anyone written CSS like this in a code base before? Okay, no hands here. So, I mean, fact is that this does happen just this one time, of course, but we all get desperate sometimes, depending on the situation. So leaving this choice open, I mean, so basically this is how you could have done it if you were strict and you would follow your theme guidelines, but you're already writing straight CSS. So at that point, the barrier to actually just writing hard-coded hex values or pixel values is very small. So yeah, we end up doing it. And here's an example, for example, from a talk from GitHub. So this is when they did an audit, when they were setting up the most recent version of their design system, and they found this amount of hex values or hard-coded hex values in their product. So it does happen, and it happens to everyone. So it's better to protect ourselves from that a little bit. So how about we don't write CSS at all? Well, that's an option. So we can take a systemized approach to our styles and our tokens. What does this mean here? An example for spacing. So instead of referencing units, you instead of referencing pixel values, you just expose units. So you talk about 1 unit of 4 pixels. You could also structure the scale a little bit differently. So it's even more restrictive. So you only have spacing tight, medium tight, or whatever your smart naming is. Yeah, so that's the idea of sort of systemizing this. And then we found this thing called styled system. And it's something that works well with styled components. So that seems reasonable. You can basically create components or sort of add systemized props to any component. For example, in this case, padding, the p equals 3 here will apply padding of 3 in all directions. And it makes it really easy to, well, tap into the theme variables. So it's not applying 3, it's applying 3 units, and that maps to a pixel value. So basically, it also prevents you from writing custom CSS. Of course, you still can. There are always situations where you have to, but the base default should enforce consistency. So we were kind of excited about this, and a lot of other companies use this. For example, GitHub's primer is kind of based upon this, and well, here's the problem. We are based on a Django app, and we have so our backend runs on a Django app, and we have a lot of HTML Django templates that have no awareness of React at all in our app. So using React to enforce consistency basically will not work. So we had to find a different solution. We ended up going with Tailwind CSS. It's a utility class framework that's kind of hot right now in the the front end circles, but it's also very useful. It's very customizable, and you can create your own tokens that encode your design decisions and use those utility classes to provide a very sort of fine-grained API that is still standardized to everyone to craft UI for the redesign. So that's what we did. Here's an example of how that then looks. We had to kind of prefix the classes to avoid name clashes here, but essentially padding 3, margin right of 3. And you can also see how, for example, the base background color is encoded here. Let's talk about colors a little bit. So there's this sort of 10 shades of gray problem. This is also an example from the old GitHub color palette. So it's the one they deprecated. But if you look at this, and you're thinking of, for example, styling a border or styling a text. So you have a little gray text, sort of like a secondary text. And now which gray do you pick? Well, I don't know. It depends. I probably look around in the code base a little bit and see what other people have done. And that sort of tends to happen. So that doesn't really tell me the function of the color. So there's a better way. And this is nothing new, of course, but I think it's kind of worth mentioning. So this is our banner component. And you can see the tailwind classes. So we have background warning, and we also have text color on warning. So the color of the foreground is kind of contextualized to the background. And essentially, when you're implementing this, you don't have to make any decision, or there's no ambiguity around, should I choose indigo rose 300, or is it like, blue violet or something like that? So try to make the choices really simple. So it's easy to make the right choice. And by the way, this banner component is still not in our design system. This is something that was implemented as part of the redesign at some point, and it lives within our app. But regardless, it's very consistent in our styles, and we're very kind of confident in being able to move that over to the design system once we're ready to kind of invest in that. So yeah, decisions encoded in tokens really helps and can get you a very long way to a more consistent experience. And yeah, I guess this is a nice quote. We shape our tools and thereafter they shape us. Basically, when we as makers of a design system have the responsibility to design a good user experience for our users, fellow engineers. Yeah, that's what I think helps to do in this case. So that's kind of what we have. We have Tailwind CSS to provide a really flexible tokenized styles, both in the app and in the design system. And on the left side, you can see our React library and our Storybook library. So as part of the redesign, we were able to provide a small number of high quality components, such as buttons or drop-downs, things you really don't want to do in pure CSS or kind of hack together inside of the app. Those things we kind of did selectively inside of our design system, but the rest really took a lot of pressure off because we could be confident that everyone who is also working with the design system can just tap into the tokens and work with them. So let's talk about the repository a little bit. So we created this thing called bricks. Previously, we had a folder in our main mono repo that clearly didn't work and enforced enough of a boundary between the design system and the rest. So we made a separate repository, and so far it's been promising in kind of keeping us more strict in what we let in and what should be a design system component and how it's decoupled from the main application. So here you can kind of see the first commit, 2-line start of the documentation, and here you see Vadim setting up the GitHub package. So we ended up using GitHub packages to publish an NPM package that then we can consume inside of the main application, and that was rather easy. Then here, a little point on shared language. So with the design system, you're really trying to create a shared language between all of your sort of incarnations of it, as well as between the users in your company of the design system. So on the left, you see Tailwind CSS for the heading. Then you have the React version in the Storybook, also called heading. And you have those predefined styles inside of the Figma library. And here's an example. So let's say you want to tell someone to use a critical primary button with a delete icon and have it say remove hard-coded CSS. So if you've done your job well in terms of creating a shared language, that should be very trivial to implement, and both on the design side and engineering side. So you should ideally arrive at the same things. Let's see if that worked. So it did work in this case. So we have a button, it says the right thing, and it shows the delete icon. And then let's look at the code version. So here we have a primary button, we have the delete icon and the variant critical, and it looks the same. So we've done this for a couple of things. We don't have very many yet, but we're working on that. So yeah, 2 weeks in, we've set up the basics of the design system, and we feel a lot better about kind of releasing this to everyone and starting to ship this redesign within a month, or I think it was like a month and 2 weeks or so in total. And yeah, so we have this set up, our package. We have Storybook and yeah, a small fledgling React library and Tailwind and Figma. And then it's time to onboard the first users. So we onboard the rest of the front-end team. So yeah, everyone, most of them are here today, and also some back-end contributors for the redesign, because we kind of all had to pull together, and we got some feedback, and we iterated a little bit on some of the token naming and some of the confusing parts that we have come up with initially. That was good. Like a real product, getting feedback and iterating. This is kind of us during Corona, watching our Circle CI pipeline during the deploy of the redesign. So yeah, fortunately it went pretty well. Ultimately, short amount of downtime. I think 6 or 7 minutes of failing requests for some reason. And yeah, this is how it looked, or how it looks now. And yeah, now what? So now, fast forward to today, we are now 3 teams, and we are kind of getting ready to be a few more teams. So I don't know, 7+ teams over the next year or so. And we're starting to see the need for these other parts to come up a little stronger. So this whole documentation section, we've kind of, since we were such a small team with David as the only designer, has very little communication to do to other designers. So it's kind of, and in the front-end team, we're also fairly small. So we kind of saved on that a little bit. Probably should have done a little bit more in retrospect around the front-end team. But yeah, now it's time to kind of invest in that, and also invest in processes of how it can evolve over time. And yeah, I mean, today David showed a first iteration of our yeah, real site that is publicly, or not publicly accessible at this point, but hopefully one day will be publicly accessible. And we're starting to make moves to a real fancy design system. So looking back, here's kind of the plan, if you want to follow that, or what we did. So define the why, so you can articulate it to other people in the company and also know what you're kind of working towards with this whole initiative. Then treat it like a product, so you can, yeah, start small and iterate on it, and use sort of a product thinking on the way you approach building it. Then find a pilot project to get feedback from users, and users both on design and engineering side, and get the basics right, which means just get the tokens right and make sure that they're easy to use, and probably also create a separate repository, and then yeah, iterate on process and system and go from there. So that's it for my talk. Thank you very much for coming out. And yeah, I don't have a tech Twitter or anything, so you can email me if you're a search me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yeah, thanks a lot, Daniel, for the talk.